talk, sorry. Okay, before I give my talk, I would like to give a brief content warning. My talk does contain brief elements of depression and self-harm. So if that's something you think you or someone you know would be triggered about, please feel free to step away. My talk will be about 14 minutes long, or 1.5 all too whales, Taylor's version, of course. But I will not be offended. Please take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you. My Wednesday morning begins the same as every other week, running up 2 flights of stairs to econ, barely beating the bell as I sit down and pull out my laptop for another 85-minute lecture as acronyms like MPC and LRAS swirl in my head like alphabet soup. In other words, the perfect time to begin my weekly BuzzFeed quiz search. What Harry Potter house are you? And this 30-question quiz will tell you everything you need to know about your personality. I have always been obsessed with personality quizzes, whether in magazines, online websites, or those weird ones you found in the American Girl doll books you had as a kid. My obsession with trying to classify and quantify myself has pushed me to find comfort in being able to analyze myself with a 20-question quiz with its precise algorithm that is explanatory and consistent. I don't have to think about who I am or who I want to be, and can simply exist as the person that I'm told I am. I am put into a box and have a list of characteristics that label who I am. And who is that? I'm not sure. The internet will tell you I'm an ESFJ Myers-Briggs, a 2 wing 3 Enneagram, and a Huffleclaw, that is a mix between a Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. That I'm outgoing, loyal, and tender-hearted. And that I have the exact same personality as Taylor Swift, LeBron James, and Santa Claus? Do the sum and result of all these quizzes truly define who I am and who I want to be? What defines us as unique people? What makes me different than you? Is it what we do, our stories, our experiences? Is it the way we carry ourselves, our confidence? Or is it results from impersonal personality quizzes? I don't know how I would like to be defined. What if the way I'm defined doesn't align with what other people want? What if they don't like me? What if I let them down? What if I'm not the person they believe I am? If I'm being honest, I would like to be defined by the way I treat people. To be defined by the patience and determination that pushed me through 14 years of swimming. To be defined by the leadership roles I've worked hard to earn. And then there are the parts I don't want to be defined by. The pieces I would prefer to keep hidden. If they got out, would that change my definition? Would these carefully concealed secrets shatter the image others have of me? I would lose the control those personality quizzes gave me. The facade I created could vanish, and my definition could be warped, and my vulnerabilities and insecurities could be warped and perceived in a way that I do not want. One of those pieces starts off my life, a piece I had no choice in, but every part of. My adoption. I've known this piece of me ever since I could remember. I mean, I would have figured it out eventually, right? I bear little resemblance to my parents or sisters, though my dad loves to say I got my dimples from him. Growing up, I loved telling people I was adopted, bringing it up when asked for a fun fact about myself, and writing about it in reports. I didn't realize how significant my adoption would be for other people until it was what I became defined as. I still remember it so clearly. I am drinking at a water fountain when this girl comes up and taps me on the shoulder. I hear her ask, "You're adopted, right?" I look up at her and say, "Yes," as she nods and walks away. Though this was just elementary school and most likely childhood curiosity, it was the first distinct moment I remember feeling different. As I grew older, this piece seemed to define me more and more. It was the first thing people saw when they looked at my family, but it was a piece that didn't matter much to me. So I stopped bringing it up. But this questioning and definition would follow me around for the next 8 years, following me all the way across the country to a trip I took a few years ago. "Is she yours?" I heard him say. My heart sinks. I can see his finger pointed directly at me as he analyzes my mom's pale complexion. I feel her hand lightly rest on my shoulder as she replies, "Yes, she is my daughter." This quick stop at a corner convenience store for Diet Coke quickly resulted in the unsolicited question that again reminded me of my adoption. Most days weren't like this, and most of the time when someone did want to know, it was a bit more polite and came in the form of, "I don't know if this is offensive," or the hesitant, "Can I ask you something?" Though my adoption does not cross my mind very much, looking back, I realized the unconscious impact it had on me, whether that was the separation anxiety that caused my mom to sleep on my floor for a year and a half growing up, or the crying every day before practice, convinced I was going to be forgotten and left there forever. In retrospect, these thoughts and reactions seem irrational, but for 6-year-old me, they were completely realistic and made everyday activities harder. As I grew up, I outgrew this fear of my parents abandoning me, but it morphed into a new sentiment. The idea I needed to be grateful for everything. Gratitude in many cases can be a great thing, but for me, it turned obsessive and unhealthy as I convinced myself something bad would happen to my family if I was not overly grateful for everything. This notion was reinforced by the media and stories of children being saved, taken to a better place by white families, as well as the idea that adoptees should be perpetually grateful for everything that comes into their lives. My parents never pushed this onto me and introduced me to adoption through picture books and as a way they could extend their endless love to another being, to me. My adoption was never a reason for my self-discontent, but I constantly reminded myself of this alternate life I could be living back in an orphanage in China, and that created underlying thoughts and issues. I never did not feel a part of my family, but the physical differences, the disconnect from a heritage I knew nothing about, and the idea of not being wanted before you could physically ask to be, created insecurity and anxiety. This insecurity created issues I didn't realize until later. The first time I remember feeling this indescribable feeling was 5th grade. It was a feeling of nothing, as if someone had flipped the switch and shut the door, closing me out of my own emotions. At the time, I didn't realize I was depressed. I don't even think I had an understanding or definition for what it was, let alone a good reason. I felt so alone. I didn't think anyone would understand. How could they? I was so young, barely even able to understand my own emotions, let alone explain them to someone else. So I stayed silent as my life, mind, and body were consumed. Then, in 7th grade, my life became consumed with a product of my depression, a way I didn't have to rely on anyone else, a way I could keep my broken pieces to myself. Self-harm. I didn't tell anyone for months. How could this happen? My perfect life, a little smudged. Throughout high school, I continued to play this character I had created years before, filling my life up with various activities and distractions in attempts to avoid how I was feeling and conceal pieces I wanted nobody to see. Through my extracurriculars and involvement, I was able to create a shell of myself, someone that was constantly shape-shifting into whoever I thought other people needed me to be. In the process, losing myself and losing the value of everything. I had no definition anymore, being a ghost of who I once was. Through medication, time, and therapy, I slowly began to reflect on my adoption and come to terms with the pieces. I researched other adoptee stories and social emotional effects of adoption. Fortunately, I had the biggest resource right at my disposal. My cousins. The 6 other girls in my adoption group, the bigger pieces of this story lying all around the US. One in Ohio, one in Michigan, one in New York, one in Alabama, one in Colorado, and one who has lived all over the US and even in Africa. Sophie, Maddie, Bryn, Elizabeth, Alex, and Isabella. These, each with their own families, their own lives, their own pieces, yet we share the same beginnings, the same adoption day, the same 2 weeks our family spent together in China. In talking with them, I realized the common things we shared, the abandonment issues, the search for identities, and the new ones we had to create, and the new communities and families found. They were all facing the same thing as me, going about adolescence as young Chinese American adoptees, and they understood me because we all began in the same spot. I never imagined I would be up here, standing and sharing my story, because these were buried pieces I never intended on sharing. I am terrified that vulnerability is an invitation for cruelty, because vulnerability is scary. It opens doors for judgments and opinions, allowing people to define you in their own way, in a way you have very little control over. I thought by never being vulnerable, I could control other people's perceptions of me. If I have no thoughts, no feelings, no opinions, I am likable. But I would be choosing to be a ghost, someone who is translucent, and that is lonely and tiring regardless of likability. Vulnerability can invite cruelty, but if you choose to give your pieces, even the broken and buried ones, to the right people, it invites kindness and empathy, intertwining and connecting your pieces. So, this is my attempt to free myself from that control. Put all of my broken pieces out into the world. You can judge them, ridicule them, understand, empathize with them, but they are mine. They make up who I am. They created me. Adoption has and always will be a piece of me, but why should I make that my defining characteristic? Because I have thousands of other pieces. Pieces I got to create, pieces I got to put my love and passion into, pieces I got to choose, not pieces created for me. High school has given me communities and families and pieces that have helped me find and define who I am and who I want to be. So, I hope I'm defined by the way I treat people, or my incredible ability to make dad jokes at the wrong time. I hope my leadership, positions on ASB, and swim, among other things, define me. More of my pieces. Or maybe, I don't know who I am yet, and maybe that's okay, because I will continue my search for who I am and who I want to be. Maybe one more personality quiz wouldn't hurt.
Yes!